Gas station manager Leah Rowland's murder still remains unsolved after 23 years despite the killer being caught on tape. Leah Rowlands was a convenience store manager who was shot dead during what appeared to be a robbery in 1997. Despite having footage of the crime and the perpetrator, the case has yet to be solved. The murder. Leah Rowlands was 41 and was working early on the morning of March 10, 1997 at the 𝐂𝐮𝐫𝐲 gas station on Highway 80 in Dawson County, Nebraska. She had been promoted to manager of the store just the day before. Leah was described as a good-hearted and generous person who was very outgoing. She had 2 sons from a prior marriage but was now divorced. At around 10:30 a.m. a red Pontiac Grand Am pulled into the gas station. The driver filled up the tank before entering the store. He was barefoot. Leah Rowland was at the counter serving a mother and daughter who then left shortly after. The man moved to the back of the shop and waited for them to go. While he waited, the man fetched a soda off the shelf and proceeded to drink it, at one point staring right up at the cameras as he did so. The man then walked up to the counter and appeared to be demanding cash. Leah complied with him, opening the cash register, handing him the money inside before she is then instructed to lie on the floor. After another minute or two, the suspect then leaned over the counter and fired 3 shots. The suspect then fled the store and drove away. The investigation. The authorities had a veritable wealth of evidence to work with in the case. Firstly, a lengthy CCTV video of the suspect, described as a white male with dark hair. His vehicle had also been caught on the cameras outside and was identified as a 1993 red Pontiac Grand Am, but the lack of a front license plate and grainy footage of the rear prevented a quick identification. The bullets used were 9mm fired from a handgun, the ballistics of which didn't match any other crime on record. The shooter had fired 3 times, one to the back of Leah's head, suggesting for police that murder may have been the motive.
The suspect left with the half-empty soda, a pack of cigarettes, a lighter, $150 in cash and a full tank of gas. In doing so, he left almost a full set of fingerprints from the gas pump to the counter. Again, these didn't match any database. The investigation went cold quickly despite everything the police had to work on. They received few tips on the case, and despite even later airing the CCTV footage on America's Most Wanted, they failed to identify the suspect. Theories. Robbery, homicide. The simplest and most likely explanation for the motive and lack of resolution to the case is a random theft and shooting that had nothing to do with Leah Rowlands or anyone she knew. Likely committed by someone who was just passing through the area and had no connection to the area that would aid a speedy identification. The police noted in the CCTV footage the suspect appeared self-assured and confident in his actions, like this wasn't the first time he had committed such a crime and they doubt it would have been the last. The case has been compared but not linked with other seemingly random murders of gas station workers over the years, and like these has proven just as difficult to solve. Hard hit. Suggested by Leah's brother Roy was that her ex-husband and their ugly divorce may have played a part in her death. Leah's ex-husband, Barry Rocap Sr., had owned and ran a restaurant on the U.S. Virgin Islands for several years before Leah had left him and taken a considerable sum of money along with her 2 sons. Several years later, before her murder, she had written a 16-page letter to her sons explaining her reasons for leaving their father the way she did. She detailed years of abuse and her fear of him. This information, coupled with the killer's odd appearance, described by some as looking like he had walked in barefoot off a beach, has convinced some that the man was a hitman that had traveled from the Virgin Islands to get revenge at Leah's ex-husband's behest. Conclusion. Leah's ex-husband died in early 2015 and was never named as a suspect officially. The fingerprints, ballistics evidence and footage remains on file, and the case remains open in Nebraska, though no matches have been made in over 20 years with any other case. What do you believe was truly going on the day Leah Rowlands was killed?
While working the graveyard shift at a factory, security guard Curtis Bichon's vehicle mysteriously catches on fire. 2 hours later, he vanishes without a trace.
In 2000, 40-year-old Curtis Bichon held the job as a security guard working the graveyard shift at a factory in Seabrook, New Hampshire, owned by the Venture Corporation, which manufactured plastic parts for automobiles. For 10 years, Curtis had worked as a patrol officer for the Concord Police Department, but was forced to retire on disability in 1994 due to struggles with multiple sclerosis. as his condition left him unable to fire his gun accurately. Since working in law enforcement was the only thing Curtis ever wanted to do, he became very withdrawn and depressed and developed a drinking problem. Even though his MS caused frequent pain, he was able to obtain a security job at Venture because it entailed limited mobility and did not require him to carry a gun. On July 4th, Curtis showed up for his overnight shift at 9:30 p.m., but since a number of people were celebrating the 4th of July holiday, a skeleton crew of only 12 employees would be working at the factory that night. At around midnight, the security supervisor checked in with Curtis at the guard shack where he was stationed and said that everything seemed normal. However, at 1:42 a.m., Curtis contacted the fire department and told them his car had broken out into flames. When they arrived, they managed to put out the fire, but since the car was parked only 8 feet away from the guard shack, the flames wound up singeing the walls. Curtis claimed to have no idea how the fire started, and the deputy chief said he appeared unusually calm about the whole situation, particularly since Curtis had a habit of storing many of his favorite personal possessions inside his vehicle and a lot of them wound up being destroyed. Curtis continued working his shift and his supervisor checked in on him again at 3:25 a.m. About 20 minutes later, a factory worker noticed that Curtis was not inside the guard shack, even though his cigarettes, packed lunch, glasses and contact lens solution were still there. By the time Curtis' relief for the next shift arrived at 5:30 a.m., he had still not turned up and a search of the factory failed to find him. The last entry in Curtis' logbook was written at around 2 a.m. and other than the supervisor, the last people who confirmed seeing Curtis were a group of employees who had been taking a break at around 3:15 a.m. and saw him walking around the facility. Sometime between 3:30 and 3:45, a foreman said he saw 2 vehicles speeding out of the factory's driveway, but he did not get a clear enough look at them to provide a description. When police spoke to Curtis' family, they learned he had expressed concern about his personal safety because he believed that illegal activity, such as drug deals, were taking place in the factory's parking lot. Curtis also said that a co-worker had once threatened to kill him over a parking ticket he had written, though this employee apparently had an alibi on the night Curtis went missing. It turned out that a pair of vending machines and the change machine located near the cafeteria were vandalized during Curtis' final shift and the padlocked door to the union office had been kicked in. Investigators were unable to determine who caused this damage or if it had any connection to Curtis' disappearance. According to Curtis' father, on July 3rd, Curtis purchased a 9mm gun from him for $200. Curtis was the original owner of the gun, but due to financial difficulties, he had sold it to his father years earlier. Given Curtis' history of depression, there was speculation that he may have bought the gun back with the intention of taking his own life, but it was later found inside his apartment. It was also theorized that the destruction of Curtis' car may have been his breaking point, which prompted him to wander off and commit suicide somewhere, but the search of the area failed to turn up a body, and given Curtis' limited mobility, he could not have walked very far. While there didn't seem to be any sign of accelerant around Curtis' car, insurance investigators concluded that arson likely took place and Curtis had been planning to purchase a new vehicle later that week. In October 2008, 40-year-old Robert April III was arrested and charged with criminal threatening and simple assault after an incident with David Horvitz, the 17-year-old brother of a man who owed April money. According to Horvitz, April grabbed him and said, "When I see your brother, boy, I am gonna slice his throat and nobody will find his body, just like the missing person from Seabrook." "Yeah, that's right. I killed him and your brother's nest and nobody will find an ounce of blood. I buried him in my yard and your brother's next." When April went on trial for his attack on Horvitz, he was found not guilty after Horvitz recanted his original story on the witness stand. However, April was a former employee with Venture Corporation and one of the skeleton crew working the graveyard shift at the factory on the night Curtis went missing. Rumors started circulating that multiple people in the community had heard April brag about his involvement in Curtis' disappearance. One anonymous caller phoned the tip line which had been set up by the Bichon family and shared a story they heard about how Curtis had caught a co-worker committing theft at the factory during his shift, so he was beaten to death. Curtis' body was then hidden inside the union office before the responsible party could smuggle it out of the factory, and the body was later dismembered before it was buried in the perpetrator's yard. Based on this tip, authorities spent 2 days excavating a property which once belonged to April's brother, who died in 2005, but they found nothing. Seabrook Police Lieutenant Mike Gallagher has publicly expressed his belief that Curtis' car was set on fire by a pair of factory workers in order to create a diversion while they attempted to use forklifts to break into the 2 damaged vending machines and change machine. At some point, Curtis caught them in the act and was killed for it. While Robert April III is the primary person of interest, the name of the second alleged perpetrator has never been released publicly. Since the only evidence against them are hearsay and third-person accounts, no arrests have ever been made and Curtis is still a missing person.